Welcome to another episode of Open Mike. I'm Mike Morse along with Kevin Dietz. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good. This is our first. We're going to be doing a part two today. We have Kenny Wyniemko back on our show. This time he is being joined by one of his jurors, Jerry Innes. And what's fascinating to me as a trial lawyer for almost 30 years, number one, you don't usually get to talk to many jurors after a civil case, especially a criminal case, especially after a conviction. So it's rare. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that happen. And so I'm interested to talk to Jerry about his experience on this panel. And now that he knows the truth, how he feels about what happened and what happened in that jury room. So without further delay, let's bring Kenny and Jerry on to the show.
Joining us this morning is Mike Morse and Croyd's Top 30. Mike Morse is in here to tell us about the backpack giveaway.
Adapt and change things up a little bit every year. Hi, gentlemen.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm good.
Kevin, how are you?
Hey,
Welcome
guys.
back, Kenny, and welcome Jerry to the show. Kenny, since we talked last, I cannot get you out of my mind. I have been reading countless articles about you. I've been seeing all your interviews. I've been looking at the Court of Appeals records, the opinions, the Mr. McCormick, the snitches affidavit to the court talking about Linda Davis and the detectives' wrongful actions. I get angrier and angrier every single time I think about it, I read about it. This is such an open and shut case of a misidentification, DNA evidence, the whole thing. So I'm really interested today to talk to one of the jurors. I assume, Jerry, there were 12 of you in the box that day. Is that true?
There was 14, so they had two alternative jurors, and once we went to deliberations, they picked two. They did that, I don't know. They dismissed those two, and I was left with to be one of the 12.
Was this the first time on jury duty for yourself?
Yeah, correct. So I was a younger person then, obviously, as Ken was, and I was looking forward to taking jury duty. I thought I would. I was a CPA. I'd been a CPA in Mount Clemens for perhaps 10 years before this, and I felt I'd be a real good person in a contract case or some type of civil case. I certainly was not prepared to be on a criminal case.
So you went through this. You went through the process. The prosecutor and the defense attorney asked you questions, and you qualified to sit on this jury. And you sat for a 5-day jury trial. And it's going to be hard to separate the two. But I have to ask you, during this trial, you voted. There was no doubt in your mind that Kenny was guilty of this crime. Is that true? Beyond a reasonable doubt.
I'm going back 25 years or so in my memory, but what occurred to me is you go in thinking you're going to have absolute metaphysical certainty, and you come up with defects in this. And so eventually I picked him, and I thought he was guilty, and forever I never questioned whether we sent an innocent man to jail or not. I never followed up on it.
And all 12 of you thought that way.
Yeah, so it was an honest deliberation. I know when I talked to the author, Bob Hennigy, he had heard rumors that maybe there's something not above board in a jury room, but we had a good jury foreman, and we deliberated, and I felt we put things out. There's certain defects in our jury system that you can't know about unless you go through there. For example, we asked a number of questions. You could request evidence to physically examine. There was really not much there, but there was some. you could request definitions of statements. And I think we did request the definition of certain doubt, things like that, definitional things. And it's just, they just read back what they said in the court. So it really gave you nothing more. And so you're left with this diverse group of people that just come from every walk of life, every educational background, having to agree on some philosophical terms like absolute certainty, right? And guilt and things like that, that after the fact, I think it's really hard to, absent a smoking gun, really hard evidence, I think you're in a very subjective thing.
Well, the standard to convict is not absolute confidence or whatever you just said. It's
right.
It's beyond a reasonable doubt.
Want to go too far off track, but one thing I would say about Ken's case, and I would say this about other cases where other cases where we can't talk about them. If it's a case where someone stole the purse or punched a person at a bar, you don't get emotionally attached. This was a rape crime. 7 jurors were women, 5 were men. These were not conversations men have conversations talking about rape in detail and talking about that. And they certainly don't have it with women. These are just not something, and I don't think we were as open. And I felt we discussed everything as openly and fair, and we did have a good jury foreperson. But they're just things on the fringes, and this could be a matter of racial justice or child abuse, things that are so hot-wired that it's hard to communicate because these are outside the fringes of our society.
Did you ever change the jury foreman, or did you have the same one throughout the whole trial?
You had the same one.
Jerry, what was your impression of Prosecutor Davis throughout the trial?
I tell you, you probably don't know about this because I don't think it was in Bob's book or came out, but I have certain connections with some of these people later on, it turned out. But I was very impressed with Davis, and I was impressed with Ostin, and I was impressed with the first police officer at the trial. But man, was I ever ignorant. Okay, what an ignorant person I was. And but I was impressed with Davis, and he came across. But what you don't recognize is a person at jury, or even a person in Kenny's position, is a prosecutor has so many more tools than a defense attorney. And I understand Ken did not have a competent defense attorney, but they actually are very scientific in picking of the jury, and and they get feedback on the jury where a defense attorney does not get that. They get to go back and ask, or they will take advantage of it. Why this? Why that? Why did you vote that? And they can talk people, and people want to talk to the prosecutor, especially, just do it. People want to talk about this experience. And so they get a feedback loop where the defense attorneys don't get a feedback loop on what they're doing. So they have so much more information. And they did a lot of manipulative tricks in the jury trial that I didn't even realize until I saw the documentary. Which, by the way,
was there any discussion in the jury room how bad Kenny's lawyer was?
No, we didn't know that, and we could not know that. Okay, so let me just take 5 seconds to go back. So I'm a CPA, and I had an accounting firm at that time in downtown Mount Clemens, right? And I had worked in downtown Mount Clemens since the mid 80s, probably not more than 200 yards away from the courthouse. All right, so I would walk up and down those streets every day, go out to get lunch, go to the restaurants and that. About 2 years after, 2 years after the trial, I was walking down Main Street and I bumped into the attorney. Was it Orlowski or something? I don't remember his name.
Markowski.
Markowski? Okay, so I talked to him. I said, "Hey, man, you were I was on that jury trial that you did, and we talked in front of that Coney Island there for probably 15 minutes, right?" And I remember joking. I thought he was good. I go, man, how'd you do that? I said, next time I murder somebody, I was joking, like, I'll have you defend me. I think you did a good job. And what he told me that I found troubling at that time was he had told me that he got a phone call the Thursday before the trial started. So the trial started on Monday with the jury pick, and he got a call the Thursday night notifying that he was going to get the trial assigned to him. And he got the trial assigned to him that Friday. And I remember even then at time, I'm not that smart about legal procedures or completely ignorant about legal procedures. And I said, how could you do that? How could you go to trial on a Monday when you just got the case on a Friday? Wouldn't the judge let you take time to review the case? And he goes, no, the judge said I had to go. And so I was walking back to my office that day and go, oh my gosh, this guy was learning about the evidence the same time the jury was. There's no way, if you get assigned a case at Friday morning, that you can go through a complex case and read the files, read the testimony, look at the evidence, talk to your client, and represent them with any hope on a Monday. So the fix was in there. And I became aware of that 2 years after the trial.
But there was nothing you could do. There was nothing.
Well, I
you
didn't
did.
even know that. There's you don't understand. Like, say, these were a pretty good jury. A jury appears like when you got called there. There were certain things I thought weird. It was on the 5th floor of the court building, and these are just like anyone in your neighborhood walking down the street. It was fairly representative of the community, but people tended to be older, and they tended to be whiter, and they tended to be middle class. There's no wealthy people there, no poor people there. It's just all basically middle-aged, middle-class people. I was selected after we deliberated. The judge came back, Linda Davis came back, and Tom Ostin came back. And one of the questions I asked in a jury trial, there was 14 people selected. Only 2 of us had any college background, me and one of the alternative jurors that dismissed. And I asked Linda Davis, I said, why did you pick me? I mean, no one else has gone to college here. Why did you even pick me to be on this trial? And she goes, you're married, you have 2 children, you own a house, and you have a brother as police officers. All those things are pro-prosecutorial. And I remember I was immediately impressed with her when she said that. I said, she was paying attention, man. That was like 2 months before, a month before. So she was picking for the juror that were going to be pro-conviction, which would make sense. Any prosecutor would do that. Where was the defense attorney there to keep people off that were pro-prosecution? I don't remember anybody being discharged by the defense attorney. There probably was, but I was picked to be on the jury because I was perceived as being pro.
Well, you're a good conservative person,
right?
Who, I didn't know your brother was a police officer, but that helps. I would have kicked you if I was a criminal defense attorney because you're going to believe the cops because your brother's a cop and you love your brother and you trust your brother. So cops don't lie in your mind.
Well, it's worse than you believe. I know you've watched the documentary now, and what I would say about this case, the documentary is excellent. And the only defect I have in the documentary doesn't mention Bob Hennigy, who wrote the book that really laid this stuff out. But the documentary is only probably 10% of the crimes against Kenny. Okay, probably only 10%. And if they put in all the total dirt, no one would believe it. It's hard enough to believe as it is, and it's 10%.
Well, right, like take the ID for example. I mean, how screwed up and messed up and illegal and unconstitutional that lineup was. So let's take that, since that's one of the key things that you guys heard about. I mean, was that a big factor in your deliberations that she was able to pick him
I
out?
don't really recall. I don't recall all the evidence and how much it weighed it out. I remember some things being made big deals of that I personally didn't weigh out things. But then one thing I didn't recognize how manipulated it was until after I watched the documentary. And I'll go through that because this would be relevant to your work as a trial attorney anyway, But the people like Glenn McCormick, right?
Well, did you believe that? Did you believe that piece of crap when he was talking?
No. I looked at that guy and said, man, he's a drug addict. I grew up in Detroit. There's many tragic people like that. And I took what he said and I made the connection that only two people knew what happened in this scene, the victim and the criminal. And how did Glenn McCormick know this? He must have heard it from the criminal that did this, and Kenny was a criminal. But you know what? If you look at that jailhouse snitch, that should be a foghorn goes out in every courtroom with everything. If you look later, I have a client that's a prominent retired Detroit attorney. And when I was telling him about Kenny's case, he goes, man, you got to read that book by John Grisham. He did an exoneration. Very, very, very similar case. It's a pattern. It's a cliche. So if you start seeing these cliche setups, all these pattern setups, you've seen that as a judge. And most judges are pro-prosecutorial. Almost all judges come from the prosecutor's side. They only get judges, and Linda Davis can judge because she ran so many people into the ground. I got so many convictions. We have a very biased system that's not fair anyway. That's just aside. So Glenn McCormick, I disproved. I found the witness. She was obviously a victim. She was a very compelling person. I found the first police officer at the trial, just a very competent man. All he did was take the initial report and call that, Kathy Witcher came across, they coached her, but let me.
That's the ex-girlfriend, right? The Kathy Richards, the ex-girlfriend.
Go through some of the defects. Okay, I felt like they made a big deal about Kenny's DNA because you mentioned that. But no, why no DNA was found in the body? No DNA was there. So you'll see in the testimony about Linda Davis, I don't think that I knew anything about DNA, about cigarettes, about that. That's what she says in the documentary, right? Why would the state crime lab make so much evidence on the lack of DNA? That was coached. So Kathy Davis, I believe, would have had to know about before. Why would Tom Olson not have her underwear tested for DNA? Why would they exclude some DNA? So that whole excuse there that they didn't know about DNA was there. I personally believe that the Michigan State Crime Lab was complicit in setting up Kenny. That's my personal beliefs.
Mike, can I say this?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to hit on a couple issues. Jail snitches, number one. They're involved in 38% of the wrongful convictions. And as you well know, I mentioned this last week, I've been doing this now for almost 17 years, helping free other innocent men and women and reform our judicial system. In my opinion, snitches are paid professional liars. Okay, and if you look at many of the cases, not only here in Michigan but throughout the country, a snitch isn't just used in one case. They've been used several times, and the reason that happens is because prosecutors know they'll give a guy like McCormick a deal because they know 6 months down the line he's going to commit another crime. They're going to arrest him again. Okay, but the snitch is too dumb. Isn't smart enough to figure that out. Okay, snitch testimony needs to be banned altogether, and 4 states have done so already, thankfully. Now, this is nothing against jury, but this is my opinion of jurors, and why something needs to be done to pick a better jury. Okay.
Amen.
Jurors are just like jurors, they're common people. I think Jerry said there were only 3 people that had college educations on my jury. Okay. Now I want to ask your listeners this. This makes sense. You're one of 12 or one of 14 people who are going to listen to evidence that could send a man away to prison for the rest of his life. So you hope to make the right decision. But you have to listen to a seasoned prosecutor, hopefully a seasoned defense attorney, hopefully an honest judge. Okay. There's a lot of legalese involved. A lot of scientific evidence could be involved if it's a DNA case. And the majority of the people on the jurors, in my opinion, they don't know what the hell you're talking about. Okay. So there has to be some way we should ensure that the people that are sitting on the jurors, the jury of fact, actually know what's being discussed, have some idea what's being discussed. Okay. And another good point that Jerry mentioned, and I've been bitching about since I've been home, is the lack of competent court-appointed attorneys. Yep. And the funding. I remember in my case, in particular, okay, I asked Markowski to get an expert to come in and testify about the physical evidence. Markowski asked Schwartz, I think, for $250. It was denied. So it's hard as hell for a court-appointed attorney to get competent scientific evidence, or someone to explain their side of the story. Yet, if you look on the prosecutor's side, they'll have carte blanche. They get a blank check.
You're right. They get unlimited. They have unlimited resources to convict you. That's their only job.
Right. That's now. Does that make any sense?
No.
It sure doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, then it gets. I agree with everything Ken said. I don't know how you select a jury pool because you want a diverse jury pool. You want somebody where people have had real life things and I think I would want more age diversity, more ethnic diversity, and that because someone's got run up by the cops. Somebody has an alternative view. But it's a fix is in on a prosecutor. One technique I want to tell you about this is what I did not become aware about until after, and this has nothing. This does have to do with how we were presented with the crime. They knew what happened, right? They had the victim saying, "This is what happened to me." They had all the documentary evidence. They knew that the person, the rapist, they said, was using a cocaine one-hitter. I'm not a drug user. I don't even know what the heck that is, right? But they would said he was wearing a mask and he's using this one-hitter. And they talked to other things about the crime, right? And they had Kathy Witcher come and say these things about Kenny, and then they had some of his friends come and say, "Oh, he took, he had one of these devices, one of this." Then they go, so they know what happens. Then they go back upstream and plant circumstantial evidence or rumor that this person did that. There's no evidence entered of what Kathy Witcher said Kenny, what their personal practice were. There's no evidence that Kenny used drugs or did anything else. But what they did was they had witness go up and say, "Yeah, that's consistent with that person."
Jerry, let me interrupt for a second, okay?
Sure.
Now, see if you remember this. The way that it wasn't a cocaine, first wasn't mentioned as a cocaine, something to sniff for, okay? The victim, and I have it in the police reports, she said that at times the rapist had a hard time breathing, and she could hear some type of an inhaler.
Okay.
Okay, that's the way The victim described it. Linda Davis then said, well, could it have been a cocaine inhaler? Could it have been, inhaling cocaine? Linda Davis is the one who brought that up.
Well, that's the point. But my point is if a person's got asthma doing it, there's no social stigma. But if they're doing under drugs, it makes it even more of demonize even more the person on trial.
I agree too. And now I just thought of one more thing I want to ask Jerry. Okay, see if you remember this. The expert from the Michigan State Police Crime Lab testified that there were semen stains and pubic hairs found in the victim's bed. He testified that the semen and the hairs belonged to someone with type A blood. I am type O. Now, back then, I don't know if you were aware of it back then or any of the other jurors were aware of that, the truth back then, as it is now, or if you're aware of it now. If the ABO blood type testing does not match, if it's different, as it was in my case, it's impossible to get a DNA match.
I was not aware at that time and not now. And actually, after I talked to Bob Henneke about your case, I went back on the internet, which again was not prevalent then, So I went back on the internet and found out, did DNA even exist during your trial? I go, did I know? And I go, yeah, it had been out there. That's why they had started this. They had done this. But where the heck was the evidence? You're state crime lab. Educate me on this. And when it's an accountant, a housewife, a clerk, an auto worker, a landscaping guy, we're not DNA guys.
I agree. And the reason they didn't present DNA evidence was because Ostin hid it. Right. That's why he hid the 4 pieces of evidence that would have cleared me.
Let me turn this off. but let me go here, Mike. Let me tell you some interesting things here. This would only make this more strange, right? So again, I'm a CPA. About 2 years after the trial, I bumped into all these cats later, but 2 years after trial, I go to hire a CPA to work for my firm. And I interviewed Ostin's wife, and I hired her. And we're going through, my partner and I at the time are going through the interview, and I go, gosh, man, you sound your name sounds familiar. I said, you have a relative that's with the Clinton Township Police Department. And she goes, that's my husband. I goes, he's a sex crime investigator. Oh, I go, man, I was on his trial. I was really impressed. He really knew what was going on. And I'm very impressed with the guy. And she goes, well, that guy, he really worked hard on that trial. And he did this and he did that. That really made his case. So she worked for me for 15 years. I talked to her last week. She's still a friend of mine. So
that's crazy.
No, it gets crazier. They'll be crazy. That's what I'm saying. Like 10% of what's in there. What was in the documentary is all true. But there's
Jerry,
there's greater crimes against Kenny than you can know.
But hold on. I got to stop 1 second. So she's still your friend. It has been proven that Ostin did a lot of shitty and shady stuff in this investigation, probably lied on the stand and on. Right?
Right.
And you're still friends with the wife. Have you brought it up with her?
Well, they were divorced. They went through a bad divorce about 10 years after.
Well, does she say, he was a bad guy and he probably did lie?
No, I'm convinced she had no idea about this.
Jerry, do you know?
I absolutely convinced she did not know about the setup or whatever that was happening to Kenny.
Jerry, do you know if she saw the Netflix special?
I don't know if she saw that. But I'll have to talk to her about it. I think I text her. She was going to go watch it. Her daughter has Netflix, and I haven't gotten back since that. So I'm sure she's watched.
So she's probably not a big fan of her ex.
Oh no. A lot of times relationships run their course.
She might be a good guest, Kevin, to get some good information out of her.
Yeah, I don't think she's going to be there. Anyway, it is what it is. I really don't understand what the dynamic was. I felt like
What the dynamic was is he was trying to get a conviction at all costs.
Yeah, correct. There's no doubt about it. Like, here's another interesting thing, and I think this was after the trial. Schwartz, Ostin, and Davis came back to the jury room. Okay, and Tom Ostin was really kind of bumped up and all like happy and stuff. I felt Linda Davis was a little bit reserved, and Judge Schwartz was just Judge Schwartz, you know. And he comes out and says, "Wow, you know, it took so long for you guys to convict." And he goes, "I thought you would you get it done like a half hour and 15 minutes for you take a jury foreperson, and then you just get a conviction." He goes, "But I couldn't let all the good evidence in. It was too prejudicial. So I couldn't let you see all the good evidence or the best evidence because it was just too prejudicial." When he said that, I put it out of my mind. And for the next million years, I thought, well, you know, whatever. The judge knew more than I did. You know, they couldn't let us see everything. And he said the guy was guilty. And I never felt anything about it. And then January, I think 2017, a friend, that's a mutual friend of Bob Hennigy, the writer, called me and says, "Hey, I know this guy's writing a book. Would you want to talk to him?" And I go, "No, I don't want to talk to him. The lady was brutally raped." And he goes, "Well, you know, the guy that you sent to jail got out." And I go, "Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he got out on a technicality." And he goes, I just don't let sleeping dogs lie." And so he goes, "Okay, I'll tell Bob," and he's cool with it. Then he called back an hour later. He goes, "You know, the guy you sent to jail, he got out. There's DNA tests proving other guys in jail on that." And I was stand up. I had to hold on to the wall to keep from falling down. I'm not lying. I had to hold on to the wall. I go, "What?" He goes, look this up. I went right over my computer and looked up. I go, "Holy crud." And I called back and said, "Yeah, I'll talk to him." And here's another convincing thing. I was telling a client of mine currently, I was saying about Kenny Wyniemko because he also knew Ostin's ex-wife. You know, we both took care of his accounting. So this is 2017. I said, "Hey, you know, this case, it's a connection about this guy sent, we sent away to jail." He goes, I described the guy that really did the rape. Like Kenny's, 5'10", 180 pounds. This guy is 6'6", 300 pounds. And like, I said, "Yeah, the guy that really did the crime was like 6'6", 300 pounds, right?" And he goes, "Ganscher." So he knew the guy's name. And I go, "What?" And he goes, "I went to high school with the guy." He goes, "I knew that guy was a weirdo in 9th grade." He goes, "You see that guy come, you walk on the opposite thing." He goes, "I always knew that guy." So I go, how the heck does this guy, who's an electrician, I described rapist, 6'6", 300 pounds. He knew the guy's name. They couldn't know that. That guy was convicted, was caught chasing his girlfriend into a fire station one city over the day before the rape trial. They couldn't know that.
Hey, Jerry, let me jump in for a second. I gotta, if I was on a jury and I was gonna vote to convict, to put someone away for 40 years, which is maybe for life, there's two things I'd want to know. I'd want to know that was the guy, that guy was there, and that there was at least one piece of evidence that made me sure he did that. Do you remember what convinced you?
Yeah, okay. So the victim got up and did point to him, said he did it. Is there any doubt? There's no doubt he did it. That's absent all the evidence that was that investigator questioned, right? She did call him out. And and so that's it. There's tons of circumstantial evidence, Some of it was but you get right to the point, and I'll admit that. I said, I don't think that there's enough evidence to convict Kenny. But I don't know if you have that in any other crime. Absent video evidence, which we think of now, but never existed before, I bet you most people go to prison with no more than an accusation that guy did that.
There's
Did
no
you know
doubt
that-
about that.
So tell me,
Did you know that she was she was blindfolded during the?
Yeah,
during
she
the-
talked about blindfold, and there's a point where she took the blindfold, she see part of his face, whatever. I just feel like it's overwhelmingly choreographed. Let me just tell you some weird things. And there's one case that I felt was like this lady, when she was raped, said the person that broke in her house and raped her stole $2,000 of money, and that was on a table. And Kenny was found with $1,500, or seen to have $1,500 a day or two later, that you won at the racetrack.
Let me correct that. Let me correct that, Jerry.
Okay.
This is something that always bothered me too. Kevin, Mike, pay attention. The victim said that she had won $2,500 bowling a couple nights before the rape happened. She was paid in $100 bills. And I think I touched on this last week because I was in a bowling business for almost 30 years. It's almost impossible for a guy to win that much money bowling unless it's on a strike ball on a Saturday night. A woman, you can't do it. And anytime anyone wins over $500 in a bowling center, the bowling center issues them a check in case they get robbed, and the checks are insured. Okay. Now, this is a fact. This is what happened. The victim said she had $2,500 in an envelope inside her purse, sitting on the kitchen counter.
Correct.
She also, in her statements, she said that her husband was in some kind of a trophy business. He had a stack of $750 in cash sitting on a counter next to her purse. She also said that she left her wedding ring laying on the purse. When she got home from a party that night, she took her wedding ring off, left her wedding ring laying on the counter next to her purse. Now, according to the police and according to Linda Davis, the rapist knew enough to go inside the woman's purse, take out the envelope with $2,500, and leave $750 in cash and a diamond ring that's sitting there in the open. Doesn't touch that. Number one, that sounds kind of shady to me. And I wish when Kim Shine comes on, this is another thing that happened, another fact that happened. Kim Shine, when she got involved in the case, she went to Bonanza Lanes to verify if this woman if Diane Klug had won $2,500 bowling there that night. They had no records of her winning that money. Okay. Now let me ask another thing, Jerry. And this is, I'm not angry. I just want to ask you if you were aware of this. Were you aware that the victim was having an affair and she slept with her boyfriend that afternoon?
No, I was not aware of that, but
Okay.
Ken, I got some insight into that too. I can give you.
Let me finish asking the
right.
question. Okay.
Mike
So-
goes back to this one.
You weren't aware of that. Neither was I. Okay. Neither was Mr. Markowski. However, this is in the police reports. The victim tells Ostin and Linda Davis that she admitted to having an affair. She asked Davis. Now, first of all, let me ask you this, Mike, Jerry, rather. I'm sorry. If you were aware that she was having an affair, would that have possibly changed your vote?
Oh yeah, there's
Okay,
no doubt,
okay,
because
okay.
then there's no. I thought about later when I found that out. Then I go, it was disorienting.
Okay, but that's another piece of evidence
Yeah.
that was not presented to the jury as it should be. That's
Jerry,
okay.
Jerry, what were you going to say about, what did you find out about the person she was having an affair with?
Oh, when Olson was divorcing his wife, I gotta say this. I don't know if I can get sued for this stuff. I felt like
You're not gonna get sued.
Olson and and Davis seemed awful familiar with each other, you know, and like they're buds or whatever. But I talked to Ostin's ex-wife. I said, you know, did she ever question the relationship between the prosecutor and things? She goes, yeah, it concerned her at times. She never had anything that should go on. And then it was only then she goes, you know, that that victim, and by this time, this lady worked for me for probably 7 years. I never talked to her about this because, you know, about my impressions. I never talked about it. She goes, yeah, you know, she was having an affair, and she had been with her boyfriend earlier that night. And if DNA evidence came up, and third time, I didn't think of that, they knew DNA, they planned for that, where they say in their deposition they had nothing. It goes, if it came out that they were going to have to put her on the stand and test about her affair, then they were going to get everyone out of the courtroom, her family, her support staff, everyone out that was not essential. Judge Short was going to dismiss everything. I think he did that when she was put on stand, saying it was going to be too emotionally traumatic to talk about rape, which seemed reasonable. But they got people out of the courtroom in case the affair came up. So they knew about that. Markowski apparently didn't know about
And they're
it.
supposed to tell him. They're supposed to tell him.
Markowski,
Right,
it's in the record. Markowski knew about it, but he did not tell me about it.
well, that's some good.
Now listen, I just thought of something else that was never presented at the trial, and this is in the police reports. Another report that was withheld. The victim's husband, the victim's mother-in-law, cleaned their house
Correct.
once a week. I have the police reports to back up what I'm saying. She told the police in two separate statements, and the statements are almost identical. She cleaned the house the day before the rape. She vacuumed all the carpets. She changed the bedding in the victim's bed. Okay. Now, when the state police crime lab expert testified that the semen in here in the bed belonged to someone type A blood, I'm type O, the way Linda Davis tried to get around that was that she said, well, the victim's husband might have been type A blood, okay? And isn't it common for a husband and wife to have sex? Well, if you just sit back, if you sit back and think about it, sure, it's common for husband and wife to have sex. However, the husband was in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for the past 8 days golfing. So it couldn't have, and if his mother changed the sheets the day before, it couldn't have been his semen. So that's another critical piece of evidence that was never turned over to the.
Here is one evidence, like I thought. I was trying to go there, but let me get back really quickly there. When this money disappeared, you apparently had won some money at a racetrack. So they called the racetrack from Hazel Park racetrack guy in to testify. We never, if they win more than $600, we make them we send them a 1099.
That's right. And I remember that happening on one.
I was the one. I said, let me see the 1099. Let me see it. So the judge did send that in there. Then I requested a copy of your Social Security, which you might have wrote down, your Social Security number. I can probably go. They requested evidence of this Ken Wyniemko's name and Social Security number. They gave Hazel Park Racetrack the wrong Social Security number, so they couldn't even run your Social Security. And when the guy came back and says, we never gave that guy 1099. He never, by our records, won money. They confirmed the wrong Social Security, so he would never pop up. Is that intentional or is it a mistake? But that was put in trial evidence, and I found it. So I told the judges we can't go on this stuff. But is that another evidence of intentional misrepresentation of fact?
Sure sounds like it.
You know what? I remember when that happened. I won I think it was $1,431 at Hazel Park Racetrack.
What was the
Right?
name of the horse?
It was
Deliberate injustice.
yeah, deliberate injustice. Yeah.
My dad used to own trotters at Hazel Park back in the day. I used to go with him in the 70s, and what
I
a
remember the driver's name was Peter Wren. I could tell you the name of the horse. I don't know. Anyhow, that question was brought up, and I did pay. When you go to Hazel Park, when you collect anything over $600, they take the money right there, they're supposed to.
Right.
Anyhow, Austin had asked me if I had won any money recently. I said, yeah, I won $1,231.50 at the track. Jerry, if you remember this, they called someone from the track to come and testify.
Yeah, he testified. I remember that.
Now, I won that money about a month before this rape occurred, okay? The man testified that I was $6 I won $6 less than what I said, okay? So they're making me out. Linda Day was trying to make me out a liar because I couldn't remember I was $6 off on a 12. That's how fucking stupid this whole
I
thing.
thought they testified that you didn't win anything, but I know they confirmed the wrong Social Security number. So I thought they came up with nothing. But I just say that's another case. So it's
Jerry, there's an unlimited.
They know the facts and make the circumstances fit the facts.
It's unlimited. It's unlimited.
Jerry, did they have you check the Social Security number around? Is that
No,
what you
I
said?
chose to do that. I said, if the guys, let me go look at that. I chose to do that. They actually gave me that evidence.
All right, let me jump in here, boys. Jerry, have you talked to any of your other jurors since this has all
No,
come out?
I've never met them. I was shocked that that they found me. I guess that apparently jurors are listed somewhere, which interesting.
And you know it's unusual to have a juror who convicted somebody who went away wrong to be friends. But my understanding from Kenny is he thinks you're a great guy and you guys are now best buddies.
Mike, let me tell you about how biased jurors are too. I had a real prominent defense attorney at that time, and he was.
Who did? You did?
Yeah, I was a CPA. So one of my clients
one of
was
your
a really
clients.
prominent defense attorney, and he was representing a dermatologist that was being accused of rape 2 floors up. I think Kenny was on number 3rd floor, and this was the 4th floor, whatever, right? So I'm walking out with a jury forewoman on the way out, and we convict them. We think, okay, we did the right thing. And I happen to know from my client that the dermatologist was innocent. You know, he had been having a consensual affair with a woman, and her husband said, and then she goes, well, he raped me, whatever. And that's what comes out. So we're walking out, and the foreman goes, hey, did you hear about that other rape that's going on right now? I said, what? She goes, where that podiatrist raped one of his patients. And I go, what? She goes, yeah, I went to a podiatrist once last year. I could have been a rape victim. And I'm going, oh my God, if this is the people, like if I'm as dumb as that, and then you have this logical fallacy that I went to a doctor and a doctor was a rape victim, I could have been a rape victim. It's no chance for any person defending himself to get off.
So Jerry, you're saying the cards are stacked against the defense. And the point I was trying to make is, you know, it's very unique that you guys are friends. And it's kind of a beautiful friendship. And I'm sure, and I know Kenny appreciates it.
Well, I feel like I owe him honesty, you know, and to help him on this stuff. I certainly. And let me tell you, Mike, this one thing you don't. The connection I made when I met him, and it sickened me that I did. This lady was raped. Okay, someone broke into her house. They tied her up. They detained her. They violated her in every way possible. And then they left an hour or so later. But take Ken. They broke into his house. They handcuffed him. They detained him. They kept him in a cell where he was under constant physical threat for 9.5 years. And that's our justice system. And you say, well, what the hell? You put him in. If I talk to my friends, I talked to my own daughter about this. I said, hey, this guy was sent. He goes, oh, he probably did something else. What are you talking about? And think about this as a quote unquote civil society. We allow crimes against other prisoner and prisoner. We encourage that. We must encourage it. We in the state, we regulate the temperature that they live in, the water temperature, where they go to the bathroom, where they sleep, what clothes they wear, what toothbrushes they have, their medical care, when they get up, when they go to bed, what reading light bulbs, we regulate everything, but we can't regulate and protect their physical safety when they go to the bathroom, when they go to the shower, when they go to recreate. These people are getting beat up, they're getting stabbed, they're getting raped in prison.
No,
that's not a justice system.
No.
You know, when you send someone to prison, okay, man, you got to time out. We'll sit in the corner for 8 years or 9 years or whatever. But when we put them in a place where they can be physically beaten and raped themselves, that's a punitive extrajudicial thing that we're allowing to happen. And it's clearly wrong by any other case.
Jerry, I want to touch back on something you were saying earlier. So we heard when Kenny was on last week that Detective Ostin worked on Linda Davis's judicial campaign, that they were chummy. You added some new insight that you employed Ostin's ex-wife. After talking to her at length, is it your gut feeling that something was going on between Ostin and Linda Davis?
It's not talking. It's my just impression that I felt like there were two.
There's a special relationship,
you know.
there.
But then I put it out of my mind during trial. I said, whatever these people are doing, it's got nothing to do with this victim. And
well, you didn't know that at trial. You didn't know that at trial,
right?
Right. You found that out after the fact.
Right. Well, I mean, during a trial, I'm looking at it and saying, this is, if I was there, if you were there with a coworker, which they were, you know, different departments of a coworker, it would seem that it just seemed awful familiar with each other.
So, yeah. So what is I appreciate you speaking out, and as you're speaking, and we're trying to figure out how to stop the madness. I mean, this was, a perfect storm. I mean, there were so many bad actors in this case. Judge Marlinga laid it out, you know, from the judge to the detective to the prosecutor to, you know, the snitch Markowski, to the ex-girlfriend. I mean, to the bad defense attorneys. I mean, everything failed in this case. I mean, nothing.
Well, I don't know.
Nothing went Kenny's way.
The police department or the prosecutor's office. So, let me say the police department. Okay, after Ostin made this case, his stock raised in the police department. He had recently made a sergeant. And he later retired as a lieutenant a few years later. I don't know if he was forced to get a conviction or if he was rewarded for getting a conviction. I really don't have an idea. I know my younger brother one time was told to arrest a person for manslaughter when he thought it was a traffic accident. He was an accident investigator in Texas. And he goes, I'm not arresting this kid for manslaughter. You know, he didn't do anything wrong. I can't prove he was speeding. And his police chief said, you arrest him for manslaughter or I'm removing him from your job. So they transfer him to a worse job and put another guy in there, arrested this kid for manslaughter, and the prosecutor decided to do it. So it could have been he was directed by even think, hey, we need a conviction here. Who knows about that? But even Carl Malenga, who I know is a good guy, I've met him before, and I've got nothing to say. There's a supervisory structure in the prosecutor's office. Carl Malenga, he's mentioned a document because he was a supervising attorney. But there's 60 attorneys. He's not the direct supervisor of this attorney. There's probably 2 layers under him where you have a group supervisor that has to be aware of this and do this. And there's probably there's got to be a hierarchy. Carl Domingo is not directly.
No, I get it. We get it. We get it. We get it. Did we ever, hey,
No,
Kenny,
no,
Kenny, did we ever get the name of the person she was having an affair with, the police officer?
No, all I found out was it was someone that was worked with her. She worked at Melfar Ford dealership. That's where the affair partner. That's where he worked at. I was never able to get a name.
I thought he was a cop.
At the first thought was that he was a cop, and I'll tell you how that happened. There was a police officer who worked under Ostin. Okay. Jerry Garnett, I think his name was. Okay. I have it in my files with his picture. Anyhow, it was this officer's job to investigate rapes or spousal abuse. Okay. As it turned out, three of the wives that this officer went to talk to ended up being a rape. Okay. Jerry Cornett was the officer's name. Jerry Cornett. This Cornett is arrested, tried, and convicted of raping one of the women that he was interviewing about spousal abuse. And I remember my dad was still alive. This cop's picture was in the front page of Macomb Daily after he got convicted. And if you looked at the cop's face, it was almost identical to the composite that the police issued in the paper. I never got to the bottom of that, but that's how this whole theory about I thought it was a police officer who did the rape. Okay. And
okay. So, okay, I get it. I get we don't know the name, and
I know he worked at Melfar Ford.
okay, so it wasn't a cop. I thought that they were trying to protect a police officer. That's why they didn't want to put. They didn't want to bring up the whole affair thing. That's what I thought came up.
Jerry, I mean, Mike, it's possible. That's still a possibility. That was never disproved. Okay.
Okay.
But that rumor was going around that they were trying to protect the cop. And then if you look back and, how this whole scenario started because I threw the cop out of the bowling alley. Well, the pieces made sense, but I don't want to. Now, I'm never going to falsely accuse anybody.
No, obviously. As we're running out of time, I have one final question for Jerry. Jerry, I like doing these type of podcasts and I like these conversations because we're educating everybody, right? We're educating potential jurors. We're educating defense attorneys and prosecutors and judges that we're all watching now. We're watching closer. But, you were not in a good position. You didn't know this was a bad defense attorney. In fact, you thought he was a good defense attorney because you complimented him. Lynn Davis was polished and was a good prosecutor. You thought you did a good job. Now you saw how 100% opposite the real evidence was all these years later. So my question to you is, if I was going to play this tape to 12 jurors who are sitting to hear a criminal case, what advice do you have for them in light of everything you've learned?
I don't have any advice. I mean, that you would hope that I felt like we gave full weight to our ability to think, but the system is so biased. Again, I was selected beyond jury. There's an adversarial system, but the other side didn't show up to fight. His side didn't show up to fight. And I don't even know how you get a pro defense person on a rape or assault or racial crimes trial. I don't know how you get that. And then you don't know about the evidence selected, all the battles that are taking place outside of that, where you can have this and you can have this. And you don't know about the lies. We see this in the news today about people required to turn over evidence and don't do this, which happened here. I'm just very suspicious of the entire judicial process.
So maybe that's your advice: is to be suspicious,
Super suspicious, yeah.
to and to pay attention what's not being presented. But
it's incredible.
It's I mean, think about that, Kevin. What it's what he I'm trying to figure out how this could have been. How he would have noticed the flags, the red flags that were going off.
Look, you're not, if you have an informed insight, you're excluded from the pool. You as an attorney couldn't go on there because they wouldn't want that. A retired police officer couldn't go on there. They wouldn't want that. They want ignorant people. They wanted 12 patsies that are going to rubber stamp whatever it is. It's a setup. And my bigger thing, as bad as all this is once we put a person like Ken, even if Ken was guilty, we put him in, and the judge came back and says, oh, we're going to give this guy 25 years. We can't go. Then he deviated from the sentencing. The guy was given 40, 60, essentially a life term on this. How the heck does that happen? But a bigger case is we take everyone and we put them into a place where this is Dante's Inferno, this extrajudicial punishment that's not contemplated in the law, where the jailers and that think it's okay to abuse and set people against each other and create a further hell.
Jerry,
because they were convicted of a marijuana trial or even an assault.
Jerry, can I ask you something?
Bad system.
Jerry, I want to ask you one question. Jerry?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I want to ask you this question. Were there any members of the jury that came out right from the beginning of deliberations and said, come on, let's go. You're guilty. What's the holdup?
Yeah.
Anybody pushing or seemed to be impatient just because they wanted to get out of there, out of the room?
No. There was one man. So the jury foreperson, she said, and I was good. I would never have thought it. She goes, hey, before we start deliberating, I want a straw vote. I just want to say what your initial impression is, and we'll just see where we stand, and then we'll start talking about the evidence. And it broke down like this. There's 12 people. I think there was a guy ahead of me. She asked first, and he goes, I really don't know. I think the guy probably did it, but let's go through all the evidence. Then they go to me, and I said essentially the same thing. They go to the third guy. And it's funny because guys all sat at one side of the table, and women all the majority. And the last guy was in his early 40s. He's a Ford worker. And he goes, I think the guy's guilty. I'm only voting for conviction. I will never vote for him to be acquitted. And it's going to be a hung jury. I will never vote. And one of us asked him, so why do you think that? Is there any evidence you saw? And he goes, no, that's just my beliefs, and I'm not changing them. And so that was of the five guys. One guy was going to vote for only conviction. Then they moved on to the first woman they asked, and she goes, well, I don't know. I think the guy did it, but we're going to have to go through. And then about the third person he asked, the guy goes, well, I think he did it because they wouldn't have arrested him if he wasn't guilty. And people are all like, what? And then they asked the next woman, she goes, well, I don't know about that. They might have arrested him, but I don't think they would have prosecuted him if he wasn't guilty. I think he's guilty. And then the remaining woman just said, well, we'll just have to look at the evidence. And the jury foreman says, I really don't know what's going on. We'll look at the evidence. But he was also the person could have been a rape victim because she went to a podiatrist. So, I'm not saying like any of us would have passed a Logic 101 class in college, you know?
Kevin, you were going to say something.
Well, it just goes to show you the general public wants to believe the police. We think police tell the truth for the most part. We want to believe prosecutors. We want to believe judges are good people. We want to believe the whole system is trying to find justice, and that if they find a problem, they're going to raise their hand and say, "Stop, we have a problem." But that's not the reality that we see out there. We see police investigators who are trying to further their career by making good cases, and they put blinders on and they decide this guy did it or this woman did it, and they go after that and they exclude all this other evidence, and they don't necessarily even give the evidence they find to the prosecutors. So then a prosecutor has a case and they're trying a case and they're trying to win. They don't want a loss. They want their boss is saying, "We've got a 96% success rate and we're going to improve on that." So they're getting pats on the back by winning cases, not by raising their hand and saying there's a problem with this case. And so I think there's a big lean, and when you see that statue that sits in front of the courthouses of Lady Justice, where she's got her hands kind of equally balanced, and I don't think it's equally balanced. I think the scales of justice are tilted against anyone who finds themselves in a courtroom. And I think maybe the lesson of all this is that if you find yourself as a juror, maybe consider the fact that the scales are tilted against this person who's sitting there.
Well, that's why
Kevin,
the standard
everything
is
you
there.
said was right. And there's 2 points I like to make on this one. One, if you can't be played, you're not going to be picked as a juror for there. So they're looking for ignorance. They're looking to dominate that stuff. Twice, like I had Tom Osnap Christmas parties or after tax season parties. We'd have all the members of firms come, and he came because his wife was there. And I remember one time talking to him about the case, just, and I was convinced it was good. He goes, and he made some joke about making up evidence, but I took it hit me wrong, and I took it as like dark humor, like just dark humor, not necessarily that he would do that. But then about a year or two later, he comes to an uproar, and I make nothing. He says, "Oh, you're always going to have the evidence to convict the person. You're going to make it up if not." He did say that. But because after that time, I called my younger brother. Said, "Have you ever done that?" He goes, "No, I would never do that." And so you were going to win. We've gamified this. We gamified it. And that's what Kevin said. But everything Kevin just said is there. We've gamified our justice system. And the resources between defense and prosecution, off the hook difference. Off the hook.
Well,
One last thing I want to say, now I'm trying to shut up. If you look at crimes, and I know some people that were implicated in this municipal bribery scandal they have with the wage restaurant, even the person doing the bribery got under 5 years. One person out of Macomb Township, that's what I know, said, "Hey, I'm going to go to trial." He ended up getting 17 years. If you don't take what they give you, at least in the federal system, they're going to give you 3 years. If you don't take that, you're going to get 33 years.
Hey, Jerry.
Can I add something, Mike? Just real quick. Kevin, I agree with what you said about, prosecutors like to say they have a 95, 96% conviction rate. What they won't tell you is, and unfortunately, what I became aware of ever since I've been involved in this work that I'm doing now, is that a lot of those, a percentage of that 95, 96%, maybe as high as 30%, come from false or coerced confessions.
Correct.
They'd rather, and like Jerry just mentioned, the prosecutors say, "Well, hey, you plead guilty to this, we'll do 5 years. If not, we'll take it to trial. You're going to do 35 years." Okay. And now, Mike, I have a question for you that just popped into my mind, and maybe we can all of us can think about if this is possible. Based on hearing Jerry's story, what happened in the jury room, and maybe the lack of interest in the jurors, is there a way? Is there some kind of a way where we could have some kind of a format printed out for potential jurors to make them aware of how often wrongful convictions happen, or some kind of tips that maybe tricks that prosecutors might try to use or defense attorneys might try to use.
Well, off the top of my head, Kenny, that's what these type of podcasts do, number one. And I do believe that a criminal defense attorney worth his salt could have brought that up and challenged that ID much more vigorously than was challenged in your case. Bring in an expert to talk about the 38% of people are misidentified. It's now becoming a thing that people know that identification in these type of situations are flawed. And you had bad counsel, and maybe the counsel wasn't terrible, but the judge was terrible and only gave him a couple days to prepare for a rape trial. You had so many things going against you. It was this crazy, crazy set of circumstances. And I mean, I think, had you had a really good attorney, maybe they could have, the doubt is so prevalent. Put it on a chalkboard, all the 20 things that we've talked about that make no sense. How could this not be reasonable doubt? But my last question, and I said this 20 minutes ago, we got to go. Jerry, Kenny testified. He looked you in the eyes under oath and said, I didn't do this. Why didn't that work?
Everyone's going to say that. You have all these people. I personally think certain people aren't going to convict. And at some point I go, there's never going to be, you're never going to have the absolute insight. And I think more likely than not. So I probably convicted on a more likely than not thing than beyond a reasonable doubt.
So that is an error. More likely than not is the scales that Kevin was just saying. 50.001% is more likely than not. I'm a civil attorney. That's what I need to prove. But when I'm arguing to juries, I want it 50.01, so my evidence doesn't have to be like this. But in a criminal trial, it's supposed to be like this, beyond a reasonable doubt. Like, you don't have a reasonable doubt that this guy possibly could have done it. And this case was fraught with reasonable doubt. And had a defense attorney done his job, you guys would have been convinced. You guys have been thinking about it, talking about it in that jury room, which you weren't.
I think there's a setup. I think there's more to be said on the short relationship, because he seemed like a ringmaster, signing the case from our house. I don't know that. I've heard rumors in other relationships. I know it ended badly for everyone ended badly for everyone else. Olson died of cancer. Dave's had her issues. Swart later died with dementia, and his son did. It's called
karma, Jerry. It's called karma.
Called karma. Yeah.
All right. We got to end on that note, guys.
All right, man.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Kevin. We'll continue this conversation. Feel free to email me at mike@855mikewins.com for questions for Kenny. Share this podcast. Subscribe to OpenMike. We will keep digging into this. We will keep talking about this. The more we educate people, the more we can hopefully get smarter jurors. No disrespect, Jerry, and get some justice out there. So thank you all for being here, and thanks for watching and listening to OpenMike.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Kevin. God bless you, Jerry.
God bless.
Thanks, man.
Talk soon.
All right. I know.
You never know who you're going to see.
Be one guy one-on-one my whole career.
What you're going to hear.
Got a lot of desperate people in the city.
On my podcast, Open Mike. Find it where you find your podcasts.